Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. I'm always looking for higher levels of learning, better ways to learning, better ways to understanding. And, this becomes very individualistic once we get past the rubbish, the immature, moronic system of education that we have that really only lets the cream float to the top. That would have floated to the top anyway and ignores everyone else and treats them poorly, as the dictator type teachers are so good at. I'm going to cover movies here that are very Gnostic in reality. They have very heavy meanings. If a movie is done well, it is interesting, exciting, and profound at the same time. And there are many movies like this. And for the period of time that these movies are made and written, the people involved in it are in a high state of Gnostic thinking. They're in a pure state and channeling very important information to you. I'm always amazed of how everything in the society is really teaching you every day. Now, you may fight that. You may not think that's true, but it is 100% true. Everything in life is teaching you ascension and bringing you to higher levels. The question is, can you recognize it? Can you use it? Do you understand it? And it takes a high-level person open to the real reality of life. And I think most people cannot do this. As a person who had a struggle in life because of horrible dyslexia, I always had to do things differently, think differently, question everything, and its importance and reality. This put me in a Gnostic state at a very young age. Most people are just basically ankle-grabbing bendovers that do everything society tells them. And they're more than happy to back the primitive, corrupt, rotten system against you because they don't want to get into a fight. They don't want to be part of the discussion. So they go right along with the criminal teachers, the sick deviates that most teachers are, the gym teacher foul scum that's out there. And they're more than happy to support these people. I'll never forget one time in high school when I was arguing with my history teacher about him making anti-American statements, particularly about the Vietnam War in the middle of the 70s, with American dead bodies everywhere. And of course, he was more than happy to be a draft dodger. I think I remember the teacher's name. His name was Droz, Mr. Droz, I think D-R-O-Z, who later became a real estate agent in an area that was booming and I think made a lot of money as well. But he wanted to put out his puking scum thoughts on the Vietnam War and what a coward he was, and of course, how we should not be fighting in that war. Now, regardless of that issue, of course, I was in the minority. I was one of the, as usual, I do everything different than everybody else. I was a supporter of the Vietnam War. Win it and get out of there. I was in the 70s as well at that time. Of course, was putting out the American flag in front of my house. All of those people who think differently of me. And of course, we got nothing but negativity from that. And so the usual nonsense. People should fight together and win, and we should worry about the politics of things later. But we will move on past that reality into the fact of in school, when I fought with my teacher, I remember some girl that was across from me saying, "Well, who are you to question the scumbucket little deviant freak teacher that you have that is one step below a Nazi? Not really, actually one step above. Who hassles people and pushes his opinions on people in a geography class that had nothing to do with politics." Typical teacher. He should have been thrashed violently for his crap opinions. But of course, nothing ever happened there. And of course, people went against me in the class because they wanted to be with their dictator. They wanted to, of course, grab their ankles like most people do. So moving on to that, so it would be nice, and I'm trying to think back if there's ever anybody that I learned anything from. Was there a teacher? Was there someone special in my life? A grandfather, a father, parents in general, brothers, anybody, even some sort of person I knew that in any way I could think of saying, well, gee, I learned something from that person. And I have to say, I guess to a certain depressing nature, that I've never learned anything from anybody. They never had anything importance to say. They never did anything. They were all cowards. I haven't met anybody. The teachers I met, while there were some nice teachers, and I had some interesting discussions with some of them, the liberal ones, by the way, who I used to argue with at the time of being conservative, Mr. Weekly, who is, I'm sure, dead by now, going to the only high school in the country named after a movie star, William S. Hart High in Newhall, California. So the whole idea is that, did I learn from anybody? Was there anybody out there that had anything of interest to say, or of any value? I have to say, sadly not. Well, I didn't read the great authors, which I've always found boring. When you really get down to it, reading philosophy, Kant, Schopenhauer, all the Nazi scum that want to teach you garbage. I didn't read any of that and really didn't find much of it to have great impact. I don't think I really found any great intellectual stimulation from anybody, except, of course, my friend, the street wizard, who brought me into magic and other things, we had interesting discussions, and who was a pretty interesting dude, unfortunately very disconnected. But is there anybody out there? Now, as I said, I've had some teachers that were fun or interesting. Most of them were just idiots. I had business teachers that loved me because I was a great business person, but they knew nothing. They were stooges. And supposedly some of the best business colleges for that level. Of course, you got to remember, this is low-level teaching. You're talking about state colleges and junior colleges, but there are levels of these as well. So all of these things we have to remember of what did any of these people say about anything. And I got a lot of wrong information from all of them, particularly high school idiots who taught nothing and actually gave me wrong information, and I knew it was wrong. And of course, when I brought it up to them, they had problems with that. Well, of course they did, because they were boobs. But of course, that's the usual problem as a person who's on the path of Gnostic teaching and reaching high levels will find. You're going to find nothing but stooges, liars, and idiots. And they probably have PhDs or doctorates to talk about, but they really are just low-level, monkey-headed freaks. They should be given bananas and told to sit at the back of the room. So the whole idea is that's what you run into. So I really haven't found any of that in my entire life, and certainly had parents that were mentally ill on top of the fact of just being kind of stupid. They had no interest in literally learning anything past reading the newspaper, which my father did on Sundays, so he could kind of act like he knew something when he never really read a book or anything else, and was really just a bozo on every level. So the whole idea is when we do understand that, so there certainly wasn't anything there, and there weren't any relatives, uncles, or anything else having a very dysfunctional family to begin with. But I never learned from anybody. There wasn't any wise person. There wasn't any teacher. I mean, I had my teachers. I knew more than all my teachers in all my subjects. They knew nothing. So I mean, that's really where people get stuck. So where do you get information from? Well, I guess you could read books, and of course I did, and I've read many. I've probably read thousands of books, and there's always some interesting stuff in books. But I generally read nonfiction how-to books, so it's not like you're getting all that great wisdom. You're getting actually practical information there. Are you going into Gnostic thought, and is there someone that you can say, well, this guy said that? Well, hopefully the people that follow me and those that follow me in Patreon and, of course, subscribe to this channel and who are using my tools and taking my courses feel that this is a person where is getting great wisdom from. And, of course, I'm always open to serious people to have discussions with them, to help them in life, etc. And I usually spend a lot of time with people because I think that's important. to share. And of course, when I share and I assist people, it also brings me to higher states of wisdom as well, looking at their problems and figuring out, well, where are they going wrong? Well, maybe I'm going wrong. So this is all part of the process that an advanced person looks at and understands and pursues. But where is there actually a place to get information from? And it used to be very comical, particularly in the olden days, in the 70s and 80s and even 90s, is that, of course, the movies. Well, that's interesting, because most movies are garbage written by very low-level people. And of course, this was very true, particularly with old TV and so many of the movies that were produced to a large degree, because a lot of it was pulp fiction and other things. But, there is even some interesting stuff there as well. And there are many, many movies that made statements of a high level that were done really well and done pretty inexpensively. And I'm not sure that anybody in modern times here that I'm talking to will understand that. If you're under the age of 40 or 50, a lot of the information I give you will probably be new to you, because there's a lot of great stuff that everybody ignores now. People go on YouTube and the internet and they're very egocentric. They listen to the same music, they look at the same stuff, and they don't really know what's going on. People don't go back. In the 70s and so forth, people were going back to the 40s. They were watching Humphrey Bogart movies and James Cagney and even silent films. I remember seeing these on TV, etc. So people used to go back and see, well, what did the previous generation do? I don't think that happens now. I think if you're a Star Wars fan, you're watching all the Star Wars movies, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that, kinda. It's certainly not very deep material, but I don't think they're watching anything else. So they don't have that bigger picture. And there's been some really fine, powerful movies that have come along in recent years. And there is a whole list of things that actually have very strong gnosis meaning to it. Of course, in recent years, which now it seems like recent, but it isn't. I mean, the Matrix series, the Matrix came out in 1999, I believe. We're talking about almost 24 years ago. Oh my God. Now, these are interesting, but we'll talk about how The Matrix, while is a very fascinating and one of in my top 10 of movies to watch to get really deep meanings, there's problems with that. But we'll get into that when we talk about it. I want to talk about, and of course, the #1 film series for getting potent information that relates to regular life. The problem with The Matrix is it put it in the scientific world and made it arm's length from you. This makes things interesting for people, and it is not too frightening to them. But that's not real life. Real life is the ultimate series of Gnosis movies, which everyone should get, and get the Blu-ray or the copies that have the commentaries on them. And I always talk about this. Commentaries are something that I've listened to for many, many years and get some really good information out of lots of them, depending on what they are and how they do it. I'm more interested in what happened behind the scenes than what the movie is about. As a matter of fact, when I get a movie, I listen to the commentaries first. And, what happened here, what's going on there, what are people's opinions. I find that fascinating. Who cares about the movie? Everybody's seen that. And that may be good or not in terms of whether the movie is good. But one of the things is how things come crashing down on you when they really are in your face real. And the #1 series of movies that everyone should watch are the Billy Jack movies. So it starts out with Born Loser, and that whole series of movies is very difficult to get through because they are so real. The commentaries talk about it even more, and how the producers, McLaughlin, of all the struggles he went through to get the movie going, and the hassles he got even when he was successful. And I remember going to the actual drive-in to watch those movies. Not Born Loser, Billy Jack in general. He did a massive advertising campaign. The place was packed. And this was the first martial arts movie of any note. And as he said, I'm going to go into all that, but there are new commentaries on these films now, done by the producer and stars, along with the original ones they made as well. Really fantastic stuff, and I have a great difficulty getting through these things because it's real life, baby. It shows you what's going on. It shows you the horrible corruption of police departments, the cowardice of your general population. It's really in your face good stuff. Also, they covered in there things that were never covered before: shamanistic trips, Indian philosophy. Lots of very good stuff there, and these are the most underappreciated movies that I can think of, period. So grab those, find the ones with both commentaries, and really jump into the Gnostic reality of life. But what I'm going to talk to you about right now is also a fascinating picture out of 1972 starring Robert Redford. Now, most people probably think that, what did this guy ever do? Well, he's made some interesting movies. Most of them are romantic movies, or I can't really think of too many of his movies in general. But he's made a couple of spy movies and other things that were pretty good. I guess one of my favorites was The Switch, I believe, called The Switch. This was a great, fun movie of its time about two con artists that really everybody, or was it The Sting? The Sting, it was called The Sting. I got the soundtrack, which had some great music on it from old time blues music. And it was a great movie, him with Paul Newman. And of course, that was one of my favorite movies. But my favorite movie of all time with Robert Redford is based on a true story called Jeremiah Johnson. Everybody check that out. You'll find it on YouTube, where you can actually find, I think they have snippets of that up there, but they have soundtracks and everything else. And I think almost any alternative person can really relate to this movie. This is really a person who's fed up with society, and this is based on Jeremiah Johnson. And what's interesting about Jeremiah Johnson, a lot of people don't understand how close to the Wild West everybody is. Now, Jeremiah Johnson lived to be in the early 20th century. And he was buried in Los Angeles next to a place called Westwood, where I used to go and watch movies all the time. I'd go there every Friday night with my girlfriend, and we would watch movies. And occasionally, under the protest of the worthless little bitch that I was with, I would go to his grave, and I would sit there, and I'd say, "Give me wisdom, Jeremiah. Guide me." And of course, I went there by myself a few times as well. But I mean, that's how close we are to this time. Now, here's a guy who went up he wanted to become a mountain man, and went up into the mountains. And the story is that after the Civil War and seeing the atrocities there, that he wanted to get away from everything and forget about it. He was called Liver Eating Johnson because of the fact that he ran into hostile Indians who wanted to kill him. And the story in the movie is there. People should watch it. So his life became the fact that he had to battle these Indians. And the bottom line is that, as I've told people, while American Indians have their shamanic aspects, there also were very vicious, brutal people who murdered and tortured settlers and everything else when they really didn't even have to. A lot of this happened off of the reservation just because of the fact that they wanted to fight back and, of course, pick on the most weak. So this American Indian wonderful shaman stuff is a fantasy. Read some books on the horrific tortures, rapes, and murders they did. And this of course, shows you part of that as well. So we need to understand all of that. Like everything, certainly the, quote, white man, if there is any, certainly that perpetrated these kind of things. And probably it was not done by white men. It was probably done by Aryans, the Arabs that people don't understand they are. But that's another story. But the bottom line is that, people tried to survive and make their way in the wilderness. They had no other place to go. They brought their families there, their wives, their children, who were brutally murdered and tortured by the natives in that area. Now, of course, the so-called white men also were far from being Gentile and wonderful. Giving Indians blankets full of smallpox is certainly about as evil as you can get. So there's no, nobody has a complete claim to being evil or good. But it is a misnomer, a pretty bad misunderstanding that Indians went around seeking peace and love. They spent most of the time, they went around killing each other. And this was one reason why the Indians didn't do so well against really poorly armed and trained cavalry who had single shots while they had the latest Winchester rifles because they bought all the best stuff. While the military had 2 practice rounds a month and had these crap rifles. Well, the bottom line is the American Indians lost quickly because they were unorganized and fighting each other most of the time. But this movie goes into one man's experience of going into the wilderness and what happened to him, which includes some very powerful scenes of what happened to people who were horribly tortured by and butchered by American Indians. And of course, it also shows how he had an American Indian wife and what went on there and how other tribes came in because they were killing each other. And of course, killed his wife and his son that was given to him by a woman drove insane by the murder of her family. So these are the type of things that everybody doesn't quite understand about what is going on. And, you didn't have a cell phone back then. You couldn't call anybody. You're out in the middle of nowhere, and you survive or not. So it's a very powerful story, and I found it even more powerful when I watched it in 1972 as pretty much very young. I don't know, it was in 8th or 9th grade. I somehow made it to that picture or whatever happened there. It was a popular one at the time. People liked that picture. It was extremely well done on a very small budget. And Robert Redford had trouble getting the part because he was kind of a sissy boy. So they wanted somebody that was tougher. But he pulled the part off pretty well. And of course, it's a fantastic story. And what's interesting about this story is, of course, it's been Hollywoodized. We don't really know the full story, but liver-eating Johnson did go through this and eventually left the wilderness, came to L.A., and died there in a veteran's home. And I visited his grave. I think that's a pretty cool story. And I'm always amazed at all the things I've actually done that I don't really think I've done much in life. But it's interesting. And if you live in Los Angeles, there's lots of things that happen. But to think that this guy who was battling Indians would eventually end up in a Los Angeles cemetery, a veteran cemetery near a major place is quite interesting. So the whole idea is I went and saw the movie probably 2 miles away from where his grave was and then went to his grave to actually see it, which I think is pretty mind-blowing in its own way. But there's a lot, this is a story about someone trying to break from society. It's a classic Gnostic tale of someone trying to get away from the pollution, the destruction, the evil of society, and really unable to do that. Now, here you go out in the middle of the mountains, you're there by yourself, you got your hawk and gun, and you're trying to be left alone and just do your own thing. And of course, this is a message that rings throughout so many literature and so many different movies. I believe in the, I forget if the exact title of it, but with Shokanagi, The Revenge of the Ninja. Well, he ran from Japan because of the problems he had there, but the problems followed him to Los Angeles, where he ended up battling the bad guys yet again. What a great movie, and some great ninja stuff by a master ninja there. But this, of course, is much more relatable to Western man because this is a Western. And a lot of people kind of resonate with that, particularly Westerners. And they see this kind of challenge of you against the world as something that is basically profound. Reading the different comments online from the soundtracks and other things, this seemed to have a great impact on people and certainly should. It's a very powerful movie about someone trying to escape life and trying to find peace where it never happened. So, after he tried to make it on his own and met many different things, which you can find out in the movie by watching yourself. This is something you should definitely watch. Go out and buy it, rent it, wherever you can find it is certainly there. This is one of the movies that they do have an actual commentary track on. It's not done by Redford. I think it's done by Sidney Pollack, the director. I didn't find too much great from there, but it is interesting to get the information behind it, find out how Redford had problems getting the part and how it was really a very cheap movie to make. It just shows you if you got a good story, like everything, you don't need a lot of money to tell the story. But this is very fascinating because I think it's something that a lot of people, and particularly people who like cowboy stories, see themselves as this independent person on their own. But you're not on your own, and life is inflicted upon you. There are so many people and things that come to your life that you don't have choices of how to act. So you have to react to certain situations. And of course, this is what happened to this guy. The story insinuates that he was in the Civil War and saw the atrocities there, and then decided to escape all that nonsense and wanted to just survive and hunt and trap, which was done in those days, to then generate money to live off of. But of course, he didn't seem to have the skills in the background, so he ran into people that helped him. So this is, again, something rare that we find in life. Who helps anybody anymore? Is there anybody that's a mentor? I started off that way. Have you gotten any good information from somebody? I mean, real information, not the crap a high school, college, or college teacher gives you, or some gym teacher idiot. Real wisdom and people who knew something, people who had honor, who followed through and did something in life. Well, I don't think many people have that, and I think that's really what lacks. But he was able to survive basically because of others, because he was very inexperienced to do this. But he ran into these adventures, and the adventures starting off with all sorts of horrible tragedies. And how do you handle that? So it's a fascinating movie, and every step of it is very interesting, and found out what he went through, which, again, how much is based on real history, I don't know, but certainly it's one hell of a story. But we know that Jeremiah Johnson, the liver eater, was certainly a real person. They called him the liver eater because this was something he did to terrorize the people that were attacking him. So he would cut their liver out to show that the fact, and this was commonly done by a lot of natives and other traditions, that you would eat body parts off of someone to get their energy and to take in the power of that person. Indians used to do this all the time. So this was a thought that he did that. He may not have ever done that. That may have been part of his way of fighting back, being outnumbered literally hundreds to one, and him still surviving, him still fighting to actually have a straw grave, as they call it, buried in Los Angeles after going to a veterans home. So he fought and won against incredible odds, outnumbered constantly, sought after constantly, because once he started killing the natives, they didn't really appreciate that, so they went after him. And of course, apparently, we can give the old chivalry reality. Apparently, they honored him to a point of not attacking him in groups that could have taken him out easy. They would attack him one at a time, where each brave warrior would take on the nightly duel. So quite a fascinating picture, and I think it speaks volumes of Gnostic empowerment there that, I can't tell you what it means. You have to understand it at a deep level. And you have to understand the pictures that are going on here. And this isn't about fighting a particular Native American tribe. It's about the fight for life and what's going on and the things you run into and the horrific things that come to you in life. And what do you do about that? How do you handle it? What is your particular position of that? And just a profound film that was extremely well done with not much dialogue and having a fantastic ending. I mean, I forgot about this film for many, many years. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I bought the film, watched it again on DVD, and forgot about it until just recently. So this is certainly in my top 10 films and highly recommended to anybody who really wants not only action filled, I mean, this film is action filled with great, great characters based on a real story, and it just screams Gnosis in your face. This is nothing but wisdom here and what certain people go through. So it's an exciting, exciting story. Talks about the West as it was just burgeoning into the 19th and 20th century that all of us should be aware of. And, this is a journey of a particular individual and that made it to the movies with a fantastic script and something we can all learn from. Well, you're not going to learn that from your gym teacher, your idiot parents, or other instructors, or even reading some garbage book out there. This is one of those profound things that for an hour and a half or 2 hours, you really get slapped in the face with Gnosis in the best possible way. So films are a great way to learn things if you discriminately watch. Now, if you're going to watch Porky's, anybody remember that reference from the 80s? Well, you've got a problem. But of course, that's mental trash, and I guess there's a place for that as well, or Police Academy. These are the type of things that certainly are entertainment, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's all you watch, then you do have a problem. But, people need to think on higher levels. They need to be intellectually stimulated. They need to look at the world in a particular different way. And movies really can provide this, particularly the all-encompassing reality that watching movies in a theater does. And, when you see a movie on a big giant screen, I used to love to go to the 90-foot screens that they've had in recent years. What do they call those movies? But 90-foot screen, 90 foot by 90 foot, and you would sit in there and you were perched right there. So these are fantastic ways to take movies in. But even regular theaters, as I said, throughout high school, I used to go every Friday night to Westwood, California, which is near Beverly Hills, but they had fantastic movie theaters there. Most of the premieres were at the theaters that were there, and they had these beautiful, beautiful old theaters from the 20s, and you really had great screens. They had great sound. And certainly this is a great way to experience a movie at its highest possible level and really get something out of it. And, it really makes an impact on you when you see quality pictures. And I do remember different pictures. This, of course, I don't remember where I actually saw this one. Probably I was so young at that time. May have been a drive-in again or whatever. But there are certainly ways to see different films that have come out recently in these great theaters, and particularly those, I wish I could remember those type of, they're special Panavision movies, not Panavision, well, I can't think of it, but these are fantastic ways to see it. There's nothing better than that to really get the experience of things. But any big screen, the problem is I just don't get this phone stuff. Looking it on your computer monitors, and I have a big one because who wants to look at a little screen? I can never understand that, but everybody wants to have just a phone nonsense. These new fold-out phones by Google look intriguing to me. At least you have a decent-sized screen. But the bottom line is that you should really envelop yourself in a motion picture. And the way you do that is by going to a big, real theater, if you have one around you, where you can actually see the picture properly. Seeing something at home on a monitor and everything else, if it's a really good film, well, you still get something out of it. But there's nothing like having a giant screen in front of you. And this kind of forces your senses to take things in at a high, potent level. If something is little and you see everything around it and you're hearing your dogs bark and you want to think about going to the refrigerator, well, these are the kind of things that ruin a really profound movie experience. And if you're going to get from profundity, well, unless you know me and talk with me, you're not going to get it anywhere. This is the best you're going to get in real life, is finding a profound film, enjoying it at a high level, and then thinking about it. I mean, people used to have conversations after movies, not go on to the next little finger flick on YouTube. The whole idea is that, that's what you would do. You'd go to the movie, and then after the movie, I would then get a pizza with my girlfriend or some other food, and we would discuss the movie. That's what you did back in the olden days. Of course, I can't remember a single thing she ever said because she really was a bitch. But the bottom line is that this is something that gives you mental stimulation other than listening to the same thing, flicking your fingers on some video game, or watching a movie on tiny, really worthless screens and getting very little out of it. Now, a lot of people have also big screens on their TVs. Well, this is another way to do it. I always try and get large TVs for just that reason. Nothing like looking at a large screen, and there's nothing like looking at a small screen to ruin the experience 100%. So keep that in mind. Remember, it's not the fact that these are genius producers, that it's Hollywood is so great, but at times, for those few minutes, for that process, for the writing of that film, for the composing of the